Well, folks, it's absolutely freezing, but that doesn't mean we have to stop fishing. And in fact, I'm off to Boddington's tomorrow. Big water, carp fishing at distance, method feeder fishing, hybrid feeder fishing. And that's what I want to talk to you about. The difference between the two, because a lot of people seem to get confused, sometimes me in fact, between when to use a method feeder and when to use a hybrid or a Dura banjo style feeder, a feeder with walls. And I thought I'd just run through when I use those feeders in different situations. So tomorrow, for me, I'm going to be fishing no shorter, I'm going to guess, than 60 metres out. Boddington is a big, open, expanse of water. I'm casting out, I'm waiting a long time for a bite. I mean, 2 or 3 fish could win the match tomorrow. The fish are averaging probably £10, so 2 or 3 of those big fish and you're going to win money for sure. So when I'm casting out, I want to create a perfect trap. It's about 10 foot deep. The feeder's got to travel a long way. It's got to hit the water surface. It's got to travel through the water column. It's got to sit on the bottom, and I potentially might be leaving the bait there for half an hour, let's say. I want to get my bait to the bottom, my little pile of micros around my hook bait, absolutely spot on. And that is where I'll be using a hybrid style or Dura banjo. I prefer one of these Dura banjo style feeders, so hopefully you can see that. I think these feeders cast a long way because you can see the weight is situated, a lot of it is at the nose of the feeder, so you can cast a long way. And I also feel these are slightly bigger, these large Duras, than a large hybrid feeder, which means I can get a little bit more bait around them. I think if I was casting all the time, sometimes a hybrid feeder, a Guru hybrid feeder, has got a place for me. But when I'm chucking at distance and I want a big parcel of bait, that's where these Dura banjos come into play. I've got a little bit of mould in there. It's always going to happen, I guess, in a feeder. But these Preston ones are great. I've got them in 30 gram, 45 gram and 60 gram. Now, I like to use the lightest feeder possible. That for me means that I can cushion it into the water a little bit better. There's also sort of less splash. I think sometimes the splash scares the fish, and that's why it takes so long for those fish to gather back around your feed, and then you have to wait a long time for bites. Also, I don't want it bombing onto the water surface. I think that's when those heavy feeders, that's when your bait can come off. So 45 gram is what I'll try and use tomorrow for fishing from sort of like 60 to 80 metres, then past 80, I think I've got to go to the 60 grammer. Let me tell you why I want to use this feeder with walls though. And it's all because I can protect the bait. So with a method feeder, a lot of your bait, it's exposed. And when you're casting out, when you're hitting the water surface, you can blow that bait off of the feeder. And like I say, I want my little perfect parcel of bait on the bottom. And by loading this Dura banjo, don't need to pile it really high, just need to load it maybe 10 mil above the walls of this feeder. I'm much more confident that my bait is getting to the bottom in one piece. Obviously, you want to make sure that you feather, or sort of like hit your clip nicely, feather your feeder into the water, however you like to do it. But you want to make sure that your feeder lands lead side down. So you want to be hitting your clip with your feeder still probably 5 metres off the water surface. So you can almost lower the feeder into the water and it's going to sort of land a little bit softer. It's going to land like that. And that for me just gives me the best chance of the feeder landing on the bottom all intact. Little short hook length, you've got a little tiny pile of pellets. So that's Dura banjo. When you go to obviously method feeder, you can see that it's a lot more open. Now, I like a method feeder when I'm fishing with baits like ground bait. I think ground baits sit in these bars on that feeder really nice. So if I was using a mix of majority ground bait, sort of like 80% ground bait with a few micros, or all ground bait, I'd probably switch to a method feeder. Loads really nice. I like to use a mould with a method feeder, whereas I'll use my hands with a Dura banjo. And that ground bait sticks in those bars, again, creates a nice little tight pile of bait, and I feel like the ground bait's getting to the bottom. There's certain situations, you know, where you want your bait to come off of a method feeder. It's nice, you know, bit of bait falling through the water, create a nice little tight core around, like obviously feed, you can wedge a bit of bait in the bars, but I know that fishing at distance, I just feel the bait's going to fall off this method feeder on impact. Anything other than a perfect cast, I'm losing the majority of the bait on the surface, and I don't want that. Like I say, I want the bait around my hook bait. Now let's talk about how I've elasticated these feeders, because I swapped the elastic out of these stems, out of the original Preston stems. I like a little snap link arrangement at the bottom, so I retie that. I'll show you how to do that in another video, but I retie that, and I just tie, if we can get that there, to a swivel, my elastic. This is 15 hollow, and it gives me some movement down here. I just clip my hook length onto this little link, and it gives me movement down here. So I think a little bit more movement is fantastic when you're fishing method feeders and short hook lengths, because obviously often you're fishing with stiff line, heavy line, and you want everything to move freer. And I will just use these Preston stems. I'm well aware that it's a fixed feeder. I can't remember the last time I cracked off a method feeder. Hopefully that doesn't happen tomorrow now I've said that, but I can't remember the last time I left a method feeder in the water for a fish to pick up. But even so, I'm using strong line. You know, I'm using a shock leader of probably 10 or 12 pounds, so crack-offs aren't necessarily a thing. And I'll just clip my feeder onto my fishing rod with a link clip, chuck it out, and I'm fishing. If I want to put a bait up feeder on, I can do that on the same link. Just creates a really simple setup. I do prefer an elasticated feeder when it's allowed. I think it creates that really nice bolt effect, and you just seem to lose less fish, definitely lose less fish with an elasticated feeder. Trust me, when I'm sitting there for half an hour like I will be tomorrow waiting for a bite, I don't want to be sitting there thinking that a fish is getting away with it. And with an inline feeder, a fish can get away with it. It picks up the bait, doesn't feel the weight instantly, and I just think if the hook point doesn't grab home straight away, you're missing out on a few fish. So they're my two feeder choices. You notice this is the alloy Preston feeder. That's probably my all-round method feeder. But there's another method feeder that I like to use, and it is in very shallow water or very silty venues, and if I'm only chucking a short distance. So these are fantastic. You know, you can get them really lightweight. The plastic bodied feeders, for whatever reason, they always land right side up, because obviously the lead is very, very much bottom biased, so the lead is right on the bottom rather than on those alloy feeders it's spread throughout the feeder. And if I'm fishing in really shallow water up to islands, let's try and get him in focus for you, this is the sort of feeder I'll use. So few companies have still got these knocking around. It's the plastic bodied method feeders. So if anything less than sort of like 3 foot of water, I always find these feeders, I'm giving myself the best possible opportunity that feeder is landing on the water surface this way up, not twisting, not falling the wrong way up, and obviously covering my hook bait. It's landing right way up. I've seen it a few times where you're only putting a tiny little skim on top of your feeder on those alloys. And I just think that when I've chucked it in buckets and when I've had little casting sessions, chucking to far margins in gin clear water and checking it out, sometimes it's landing the wrong way up. And obviously you're sitting there, especially in the summer months, you're sitting there maybe like 4 or 5 minutes, you're not getting a bite, it's a fish race, you're wasting time in the water. So a plastic bodied feeder is the way to go. Also on silty venues, you can get this style of feeder in like as little as 15 gram. It's not going to sink into the silt. So venues like Hallcroft, venues that are a little bit more open water, this is the style of feeder I use. A 15 grammer, really lightweight feeder, sort of sits on the silt rather than in it. I think that's the winner. So that's my choices for method feeder work. Hopefully I can chuck that banjo out tomorrow, get a few wrap rounds, 2 or 3 fishes to target. Wish me luck.